All right, I'm going to move on to A and P. Again, I hope that you've read this story. If you have not, you should, and then come back to this. But A and P is a wonderful story. I think it's hilarious, to be honest. Um, and we're going to start with the title. Now, the whole concept behind this story is that this young man, this teenage boy, is oogling these girls as they walk into the grocery store with their swimsuits on, and he's staring at them. And the manager calls them out for not wearing enough clothes, and our protagonist Sammy quits, presumably to defend their honor. But we'll talk about that in a moment. So A and P is the title of the grocery store. It's the name of the grocery store. But A and P also has a meaning in college, right? Anatomy, anatomy and physiology, right? A and P. When we study anatomy and physiology, what are we looking at? We're looking at the body. So just think about how appropriate that title is for this particular story, because that's what that character is doing the whole time. Okay, the setting. Let's talk about the setting for a moment. Um, what year A and P updike? Because I want to verify, make sure. So 1961 was when it was published. So when we're looking at this, probably this story would have taken place maybe about the 50s, right? 1950s. Oops, 1950s. So let's look for a moment. Swimsuits. Swimwear of the 1950s. When he tells us that these girls are wearing bikinis, I'm imagining, frankly, something along the lines of this young lady here with the high waist bikini. She's barely showing her midriff. When he's talking about them in their bikinis, it's not the shoestrings that we see today. It's not modern bikinis. These are like 1950s bikinis. So a little bit more covered up even than you and I may be accustomed to. So that is something to help you get the idea of what these girls might have looked like walking into the grocery store wearing their swimsuits. Um, I also want to note that was, I mean, that was huge for the 50s. That's not something people did, right? In the 50s, clothing was not nearly so easy to come by as it is now. And so when you had clothes, you had a work outfit, you had a school outfit, you had a church outfit, not multiples like we do now, and you kept them fairly nice, and you wore them to the appropriate place. So wearing swimwear into a grocery store was nearly unheard of. And also consider just women's fashion. So women's fashion of the 1950s would have been these little skirts and dresses like this, very covered up, really, considering. And so showing their shoulders was a huge thing. That was risque. And as a matter of fact, showing your shoulders, showing your ankles, pretty risque, but still done. But for the most part, the dress were, I mean, think about like I Love Lucy kind of dresses. Women were expected to keep covered for the most part. And so them wearing swimsuits again into a grocery store, huge deal, huge deal. Okay. Another thing to consider with this particular story is the fact that Sammy quits his job at the end of the story. And that for us would be no big deal. Okay. We have this mentality in our society that, yes, I need to work, but no, I don't have to work here. Okay. If Walmart fires me, I'll just go down the street to Brookshire's and work there. So what? Well, Sammy can't do that because there's only one grocery store within a 50-mile radius. Okay, um, there's probably not that many 50. There's not that many grocery stores in the 50s. There's not that many places to work in the 50s. Period. So when people got jobs, they tended to hold on to them, even if they were that of a grocery store clerk. So the fact that Sammy quits his job at the end of the story is actually huge. It is huge because he doesn't know what he's going to do for the rest of his life now. It leaves a giant, giant question mark over the rest of his life whenever he quits that job. So that's a huge thing to consider for this setting and knowing those things about the 50s. You'll probably see some of the language and things like that in this story too that is highly characteristic of the 50s. So a lot of things here to think about. Okay, characters. We have Sammy, who is our protagonist. Sammy is a young man. He's in his teens. I believe he's 17. And then we have uh, presumably he's single because he's looking at the girls the way he is. Okay, we have Lingle, or let's do Stokesy first. I like Stokesy as a character. He's a wonderful character. He's 23, married, with I believe 2 kids. It says. So he's got kiddos. He's married, and then we have Lingle. And Lingle is I don't think it ever says his age, but I'm guessing somewhere in his 30s. And he's a pastor, a youth pastor at the church. Um, and so he's that's all the more reason for him to be very offended by these young women who walk into the store without their clothing on. So those are all important characters. We also have Queenie, who is the queen. We have I don't I don't remember all the names he calls, or the chunky one. I think it's interesting while we're on her. Um, as we go through the story, the words he uses to describe her become increasingly negative. He starts off that she's round and cute, or chubby and cute, and then by the end of it, she's fat. And so that goes along. One of my arguments for this story is that Sammy originally is attracted to her and not Queenie. And then he notices Queenie, and then suddenly she starts looking not so good. So, and that's something that we do subconsciously in our conscientious. This is a very human story, a very human story. Sammy describes and says things in ways that we probably think about, but we never say. And I think that's very human. We also have, I don't remember what he calls her, Goonie or Giraffe. She's got the long neck. Um, I'm just going to put tall girl. I don't know. I don't remember what all he calls her, but she is obviously not that attractive for Sammy because he doesn't spend a lot of time describing her. So pretty interesting stuff happening there. We also have the coin counter lady, and I love her because, again, very human. If you've ever been in Walmart, it's the woman who walks in and says, "I want to talk to your manager," right? Um, I hope I don't offend anybody, but the common phrase now is Karen. I don't want to offend anybody by saying that, but that's what they've talked about, this woman who she, again, very human in this story. We know her. I've been her. We know who this is. It's the lady who's watching you count her coins and yelling at you because you didn't give her 1 penny back, or she's counting your coupons or something like that. Yeah, we know her. And then you have the butcher at the back. And I really like the butcher also. Again, small characters count. And if you can imagine this store, before the girls walk in, you have the butcher at the back of the store, and he's cutting meat. Clunk, 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 clunk. Music majors, that should sound like a metronome. Okay, it's just keeping a steady rhythm. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Just keeping that steady rhythm, kind of like a clicking talk, a ticking clock, right? So you have just this steady humdrum rhythm of predictability that Sammy describes before the girls walk in. You have the sheep. I love that as a symbol, by the way. The sheep are important. It's all the other customers, the sheep that walk around, and they all walk around the store in exactly the same direction. They all buy exactly the same thing. They all dress exactly the same way. And you have the butcher back there just going clunk, clunk, clunk. What a boring, sad picture we are given before these girls walk into the store. So when we consider that, and that's why I put up there this information up here, I think is really important. When we consider that, it's very boring, it's very predictable. Sammy may very well be looking at his future for the rest of his life in this grocery store. And when we consider that, how easy is it for us to think about Stokesy is Sammy in a few years? How easy is it for us to think about Lingle is Stokesy wants to be Lingle in a few years? Sammy could conceivably become Stokesy and then later on become Lingle. That may be his future. When he looks at those two other men, maybe that's what he sees is his future. So when we get to the possible plot or theme for this story, we need to consider, is Sammy being a hero? Is he standing up for these girls when he quits? Or is he being a just a short-sighted kid making a rash decision to show off for the girls? Or is he just looking for an excuse to exit, to get out of that monotonous, boring, terribly predictable situation he finds himself in that grocery store looking down the barrel of his future? So is this his exit? Is he being a hero, or is he just being a short-sighted kid who's not really considering his future when he decides to quit his job for girls who don't even see what he did or acknowledge it? So what is this story about? All of those questions are going to factor into what do you think is the theme for this story? Is Updike's our author? Is he standing up for women's rights to dress the way they want? Is he telling us to beware the consequences of our actions? Or is he telling us to seize the day and get out there and break free and do something scary and frightening and put a big question mark on top of your head and see what happens? What is he doing with this story? And I think that's, again, very much up to you. And he may be doing something totally different with this story. Maybe you think so, and I want to hear that. Do you think that maybe Updike wrote this story for a totally different reason that I'm not even considering here? The plot, you guys can probably figure out pretty easily. I'm not going to go through it. Point of view, of course, is first person because we get everything through Sammy. Symbols, you think about things like the sheep are really important. The money in her swimsuit, that's very seductive. I love the hi-ho crackers. The hi-ho crackers, if that's not a symbol, I don't know what is, because Sammy's holding hi-ho crackers when the girls walk in. And he goes, ah! It's when he double checks the item. That's actually the item that he accidentally scans twice, and the coin counter lady yells at him. So, I mean, when these girls walk in, it's like Sammy's mouth drops open and the world stops for a second. That's just what happens. If you can imagine maybe some drool coming out of his mouth, I don't know. But the world just stops. And that hi-ho cracker is such a symbolic item there. Not the ho part so much, just so you know. The hi part. Like he goes, oh, hello. It's this moment he kind of wakes up a little bit, I would argue. And in that same line, Stokesy's the one that actually has to wake him up. He says, oh, Daddy, hold me. And it's Stokesy's way of saying, hey, wake up. You're drooling. You know, he's making fun of him when he says, oh, Daddy, hold me. He's telling Sammy, oh, I know you wish that girl would tell you that. You know? So the crackers are definitely a symbol. We have at the end, Sammy takes off his apron and his bow tie, and those are highly symbolic. Consider an apron. Apron is a mark of servitude and labor, hard labor. And when Sammy takes that off, he's putting that away, right? That could be highly symbolic. We also have the bow tie, which if a bow tie is tied too tightly, it can strangle you. Yeah. So those are different things that you can look at. Stokesy's tattoo, symbolic. The even the cellophane toys. When it talks about those, I think about like the Dollar General type cheapy dollar toys. Um, how they're layered with dust and things like that. It's just there's so many symbols in here. The I love when she's buying the kingfish fancy herring snacks in pure sour cream. Um, that is just such a specific item. Kingfish fancy herring snacks in pure sour cream. And it makes him automatically imagine that this young lady is part of a very high society. And so, in that way, this story could very well be a comment on class. And he puts her in the upper class automatically, imagining her drinking champagne with her herring snacks in pure sour cream, which does not sound delicious to me, but I've never tried it. Um, it just puts her in the upper class, and he talks about drinking beer out of the jelly jars. Many of you are too young to know this, but even when I was little, the jelly and jam jars used to come with little cartoon characters. Like, let's see, uh, old jelly jars with cartoon characters. And so, yeah, exactly. These fun little jelly jars used to come with like cartoon characters on them, like Winnie the Pooh and uh, yeah, I actually had one with Winnie the Pooh on it. And we would save the jelly jars, and guess what? For us kids, we would drink our juice and drinks out of those jelly jars. I remember very clearly. I had a Winnie the Pooh one that was my favorite. I also had one with, I think it was Rainbow Bright on it, and I love that one. So anyway, not to show my age, sorry. Uh, but that was something that happened. And so when he's talking about drinking beer out of the jelly jar, he's really talking about class and how this young lady is so much more classy than he is. You can probably pick up on some irony pretty easily in this story and foreshadowing also. Although Sammy quitting his job did come out of the blue for me, so I'm not sure how much foreshadowing there is, but I really do. I love this story. He is so dirty and so perverted. He's talking about things like the round half moons as the young lady walks away, or the sweetest scoops of vanilla, talking about her bathing suit top. I mean, it really is a perverted story. So when you're talking about this and considering, is Sammy standing up for these girls' rights? Um, you have to consider he was just oogling them. He spent the entire story thinking about how beautiful and sexy and appealing these young ladies are, and then he turns around and tells he chastises the pastor, the youth pastor, for oogling the girls and telling them to cover up. And so is that Sammy actually being a hero? And I think there's a lot of room to say yes, he really is, because maybe that's his moment of growing up. There's actually an entire genre of texts that talk about, it's called the coming of age. There's all of these books. Harry Potter is one of those books. And and in the coming of age stories, there's always a moment where suddenly this kid becomes an adult. So for Sammy, is that the moment when Lingle says that the girls need to cover up? Is that Sammy's moment where he comes of age and suddenly he says, "No, hold up, no," and he grows up all of a sudden and he becomes an adult? Um, Certainly, quitting his job would entail maybe him becoming an adult. I don't know, but so there is room to say yes, he is a hero. There's also room to say no, he is not a hero. He acted rashly. This is about consequences. Um, there's plenty of room for any way you want to look at this story. So I want to encourage you to take a deeper look in this story. I hope you enjoy it. Again, I think it's hilarious, and again, very human. Sammy reacts in exactly the way that I would imagine a young teenage boy in that situation would react. Um, and I think it's so funny and so fun. It's a great story. So I hope you enjoy it.